shaking up your family, and what about the grandkids?
To get into all the groups and to respond to various questions. I'd like to take another 10 minutes or so for more questions. Then we want to talk about how you can do these things in your community and also talk about some possible dialogue training for folks who want it. So I just continuing with the questions, things that didn't get answered in your small group or that you want to have more conversation about. Yes, Jennifer.
Can you just give a quick stand up if you wouldn't mind?
Stand up and shout.
Can you just give a quick overview of the kinds of exercises you did, sort of in order? So I'd just be curious to get a sense of like how you built a sense of trust and friendship.
So somebody in one of the groups asked if the conversations were just casual, and I said they were the opposite of casual. Dialogue is structured conversation. Casual conversations is what people have all the time that wind up in arguments. Whether it's Trump or who started the war or what happened in your neighborhood. So dialogue is to go around that with very structured conversations. And I thought very carefully about the design of this weekend from the moment of arrival to the moment of departure. And I thought about it a lot. I thought about the dialogue questions and the different activities and why different activities at different times, etc. And we set the stage early. I did some dialogue training for the 18 of us in Leverett ahead of time. We practiced asking questions and responses and how to deal with hot button issues, etc. And I sent all the materials I used to Ben in Kentucky, and he trained those people. So we already had a little bit of background before we met. I also tried to match up each host and each guest as closely as I could around common interests. And then I asked the host to please write to the guests. So people were coming here, they're scared. They've never been to New England. We're a bunch of whatever stereotypes they had of us, and they had lots of them, to try to break that down. And so there were emails and letters and phone calls and Facebook messages. So people were already kind of predisposed to what we were going to be doing. And then they arrived very late Thursday night. We met them in town hall, and Sarah had written this gorgeous Hands Across the Hill song, and she sang it to everybody. So we began with this very heartfelt thing, and then they loved to sing, and they were very good singers, and they sang Bright Morning Star to us. So this is Thursday night in the town hall after they've been driving 13 hours. So people were already pretty vulnerable, pretty tender. And then everybody went home to their hosts, and we met again. We used Friday and Sunday, we used this facility. It's a wonderful room for us. So we met here on Friday, and we started with some introductory games, name games. We had all half a dozen different kind of, new games for learning names and playing and doing various things. And then I invited an artist in to do an art exercise about families that she had done shortly after the election when we started this whole Leverett Alliance. this woman, Judith Inglesi, she's here tonight, she's a local artist, and she had everybody make squares, paper squares, and write on them their family of origin or immigration stories. And it was in response to Trump. It was trying to deal with the fact that we are all immigrants, unless we're native peoples here, and we all have stories, and we all come from someplace else, and we have to be welcoming of the other, the sort of, welcoming the stranger. So I asked this artist to come back for the Kentucky Day to do that with our guests. So we all sat in this room, we had tables, and we had paper and scissors and paste and all sorts of things, so we kind of played together. It's another nice ice-breaking thing to do. And all of us from Leverett also made squares, sat with them and made them, and the artist is going to hang them up on a banner, which we're going to bring to Kentucky with us in April as a gift for them. We have one hanging in our library, and then there'll be one hanging in their library. So that's another little sweet bond. And then we got in a circle after the art exercise, and I invited people to share their stories, their family stories. And as some of you may have heard in your small groups, we had a lot of people who were first or second or third generation immigrants from Europe. Quite a few people were Jewish and had Holocaust stories. And then we had people who were other European origins and had immigration stories. And those stories were pretty alive in our families. And in some cases, one woman's case, she was a first generation. Her parents had escaped the Nazis, not her grandparents or her greats. So she was crying as she was talking, and other people began to cry. So there we were, it's only Friday, and we're already in a puddle of tears. So things are moving in the way I want them to. We're not banging heads, we're building compassion and empathy and understanding, which is what we want to do in dialogue. It's what dialogue helps people to do. And one of the women said, one of the Kentucky women, that she had never met an immigrant or refugee.
Couldn't hear.
She had never met an immigrant or refugee, which is so surprising to us because we're coastal people, and there's a lot of fluidity in coastal people. We're also academic university towns with much more fluidity than even usual. But Kentucky's very isolated. Eastern Kentucky, coal country, is very isolated, and they don't have that experience. So this was very important for them. This woman said that she was taught to hate refugees, and she couldn't do that anymore because here's this woman who's becoming her friend, who's in her puddle of tears. So that was very important, and then they told their stories. You want to say something about their stories, either of you, please? Trying to share my toys here.
Got one, Pat?
No, you.
No, I'm blank on it.
Okay. Well, what happened for them was they started to tell their stories. Their stories were about coal. Mm-hmm. Their stories were about exploitation. Mm-hmm. Their stories were about black lung disease, about people dying because a 5-ton rock hit them on the head in the coal mine, or the coal car disabled, or some terrible story.
Yeah,
they had
please.
these. Pam, would you get me some water, please? They had these terrible, terrible stories about coal mine disasters. And they talked about fathers, sons, husbands, brothers, grandparents disappearing from coal. Because, so we had our tragedies, which were immigration, and they had their tragedies, which were coal. And they've lived there for a very, very long time in coal country. And there's no place that they've gone. They don't move around a lot. They're pretty static in terms of their lives. And so all they know is coal and coal tragedy. So I felt personally very moved. I don't know this history. I don't know people with lives like that. 100 years with the company stores. And the mining strikes. You all know those Harlan County strikes and the mining strikes. And the company store owned the housing, owned the schools, owned the loan companies, owned the food supply. And they were just dead all the time. and they couldn't get out of it. And it's an extractive industry. Not only do you extract things from the ground, but you extract things from the community, and everything goes out. And before the coal, they had lumber barons who came in. Most of these people were not literate, and these lumber barons and coal barons would give them a contract and say, just put your thumbprint here. And they lost the rights to what was on their land and under their land, permanently. So this is the kind of oppression that my family doesn't know about, and probably yours doesn't know about. But it gave us tremendous empathy. So that's what was happening. This is a shift back and forth between the two groups. And then we had a potluck supper. We had so many potluck suppers, you wouldn't believe how much potluck supper we had. We fed them all weekend, and our wonderful 18 people did all the work and also fed everybody all the time. So we had a potluck supper here, and then I invited a friend of mine who's a theater professor to come and do some theater games, and Ben, my Kentucky counterpart, is also a theater guy. And so we did a lot of theater games. We did spectrum lines and all kinds of other things that would kind of lighten the mood a little bit, but would still be on serious topics. And I think the most interesting one was about the guns. You remember about that one?
Yes. Do you all know what spectrum games are?
No.
Okay.
Can you stand up, please?
Stand
Sure.
up and yell.
The director of the game asks you to line up, and there's a pole at one end, a pole at the other end. And he would say, how many of you, or if you're in favor of strict gun control, I want you to stand at this end, and if you're in favor of no gun control at all, I want you to stand at this end. And you can choose anywhere along the line where you wish to stand. Now on the gun control one, if I remember correctly, there were only 1 or 2 people, no controls. The whole of Leverett was and there is people in the middle. So we did a number of exercises like that. Yeah, different. We started out with non-political issues, and then we worked up to the more sensitive ones like that. But it was very real.
And that was very useful. But we also did some exercises on not listening. We did some theater games where you just talk, and nobody listens. You know, it's kind of an antidote to dialogue, which is all about stop talking and listen. It's all about listening. You know, and the kind of listening we want people to do. So we did all those things Friday night, and we did arguing games and just a lot of energizers, and it was nice. It was a nice variety because you can't sit in a dialogue circle all day. It's too intense. You have to break it up with other things. But everything we broke it up with was intense. The intention was to build the group, to build the community, to build the trust, to build the compassion for the group. So that was Friday. We all went home and collapsed. And then Saturday morning was our community event. And for those of you who were there, you know what a miraculous experience that was. Just like we didn't expect so many people tonight, we don't know how many people we had there. The fire marshal hopefully never will find out at this either. But we must have had 250 people in that room. We had so many, maybe 300. We had so many people that select board said to us, "We're going to have you run our next town meeting." We can't even get a quorum of 70. So I think the fact that there were so many people there blew the minds of our Kentucky group. You came for us, to listen to us. Who were we? Why are you here? They were so touched by the turnout from the valley. They couldn't believe that people would show up to listen to them. So they didn't know they were going to speak. They had no idea that, and they were all terrified before things started. They didn't know they were going to say a word, and then one after another, they just spoke. And there was this dance between listeners and speakers, and it felt like the more they spoke, the more the Valley audience responded, and people were cheering and clapping and being on their feet, and so they just kept talking because it felt good. Whoever has an audience like that, you know, people from Kentucky don't have audiences of 300 people listening to their every word. So it was very important for them. It was beautiful. And And it just kept going on, and then Anne Louise brought her gorgeous music, and we had the Leverett Community Chorus sing for us, and that just kind of was another highlight at the end of the morning. We had Sarah's song in the beginning of the morning, again, sung with one of the women from Kentucky, so it was a little schmaltzy, but it was really nice. It was really, really nice. And then, yes, Chris.
No, finish.
Go ahead.
I don't want to interrupt. You've done this kind of work in Rwanda and Sri Lanka and Bosnia and Myanmar and so on. How would you compare this to those situations?
Well, I think what happened for me was I took everything I've learned in the past 30 years and brought it home. And that was kind of nice, that I could take all the skills that I had learned and use them here. The difference is I'm part of this community. When I'm working in Bosnia, I'm neither a Serb nor a Bosniak. I'm working in Rwanda, I'm neither a Hutu or a Tutsi. I'm a third-party neutral. This is different. This is my community and my voting issues, etc. So it's more personal, and it also feels lovely for me to bring it home because I go. You don't all know what I do until I do it here. So it's nice for me to do it here. It feels really good for me, and it feels like, as the Quakers would say, the way is opening for more of this. It feels like this is the next chapter in my life, and I don't tend to invent things. I tend to wait for them to come, and this is what's coming. So it felt really good. But it was based on the experience of the skills, because when I work overseas, the workshops are 3 or 5 days, because you can't do it just one day when you're traveling a gazillion miles. So doing this long form was something that I wanted to do because I know that it's so much more impactful than doing just a Saturday dialogue, which you can do with local people, but the homestays, the meals, all the time together, it matters. It changes things. It's a retreat. It's like going on a retreat. It's really that kind of an experience, and that matters. So Saturday morning, what we had, and then at lunchtime, it was a little chaotic, but it worked. I wanted people to have a chance to talk to the Kentuckians in small groups, so I suggested that the Kentuckians sit at different tables during the potluck, and they did, and there were wonderful conversations going on at lunchtime with 1 or 2 Kentuckians at each table with a bunch of people from the valley. So that went on for a while, and then everybody cleared out, and we had our second dialogue. And I thought, I think it's time to talk about Trump. Gotta talk about Trump at some point. And I don't remember exactly how we got into it. We'll discover it. We had the whole thing videoed, so we'll discover it maybe someday on the video. But it felt like there was enough love, trust, connection in the room so that we could talk about this very hard subject. And we talked about Trump, and they talked a lot about why they voted for him. They didn't all vote for him. One person said she didn't vote for him. Her son and her husband and her brother all did, so she's feeling the tension around being the outlier in her family and how hard that is. Gwen, the woman who talked about the abortion, said that in the public forum, she said, she decided when a woman ran for president, she'd vote for her no matter what party she was from, right, just to get a woman. And then she said, I couldn't betray my people, and so I voted for Trump.
No, she said Hillary came next door and said, we're going to close
That's right. Hillary said we're going to close the coal mines. Hillary said other things after that. Nobody heard them. She said we're going to do job training, we're going to do this and that. All they heard was Hillary's going to close the coal mines, and then we were told that the Trump campaign used that in all the states in the coal country, all over Appalachia, and they would send people cards with that quote on it. And Trump said we're going to bring back coal. So what would you do? Yeah. That's what they did. They voted on one issue only, and they talked about that a lot in this Saturday afternoon dialogue. And at some point I wanted to challenge them a little bit because I just felt it wasn't lively enough, and so I said something about I made some comments about you seem so attached to coal, and what about thinking about new things? And that got into a whole new round of why they should and why they shouldn't and why they haven't. And it was a good heated discussion. So we were not there to get them to change their votes or their minds. They were not there to get us to change our minds. We were there to deconstruct the negative stereotypes and demonization we have about the other, which goes both ways. Doesn't just go how we feel, it's also how they feel about us. Sure. In order to build resilient communities, because we're going to need them, because we're in such trouble. And the more we can have them, the better off we'll be. So that was Saturday afternoon, and then we had another potluck at the Grange in Montague, and a wonderful celebratory contra dance. And it was really fabulous. We all danced with them. You know, that was really fun. We did dance together. And we taught them contra, and they taught us clogging and square, which they do. And we had gorgeous shape note singing Saturday night during the contra dance. Everybody was singing. It was really community. And it didn't matter by that point who they had voted for. It was sort of beyond voting. It was not about that anymore. It was about building this community. You know what Dr. King used to talk about, the beloved community, and this is what we need in our country and our world. And that's what we were going for. So that was Saturday night, and then Sunday morning people had time with their hosts, and they went to the Leverett Co-op, and they went to the book mill. Great Leverett and Montague seaside scene. Some people went to Amherst. The teenagers in our midst went off with the Amherst teenagers to Northampton and got their minds blown, and they had never seen a place like Northampton. It was a make of it, and they were thrilled. And people had lunches in various places, and then we came back here for our third and final dialogue. And I had a whole bunch of questions. I never got past the first question. The first question was, what did you learn this weekend? It took 3 hours. From 2 o'clock until 5 o'clock, what did you learn this weekend was our conversation. And anything else that I might have wanted to ask, we just never got there because things were pouring out. Very deep, very deeply, very transformative.
On both sides.
Everybody was in this. It was very teary. We talked before the end about what we want to do in April. We're going April 20th weekend, and we had a whole long list. We brainstormed kind of things we'd like to do there, what we want them to show us, how we want this to be. And then we had a lot of very, closing circle with a lot of very tender closing comments. And then we must have had another potluck. We did another potluck. Which is also nice because they do it together. Just one second, Jill. And then Sunday night, Mark and Shannon, our friends from Leverett, who were part of the Alliance but not on the bridging group, had the great idea just a few weeks before they came about having a music jam. So we packed into their house. God knows, sort of like a night like this. Everybody packed into this house, and there were tons of musicians.
Stormy night.
What?
But it was like pouring rain, and actually trees fell down on our land. And one of the teenagers came up to me, one of the Kentucky kids, and they were like outside, and they were soaked, and they were like, I think trees are falling down in your yard. I'm like, that's okay, they're not falling on the house.
And so we had a wonderful, wonderful music jam evening, and we're going to now make this into a Leverett tradition. We're going to have monthly music jams because it was, even without the Kentuckians, it's something we can do in our own community. And that was kind of a wonderful high for everybody. And then Monday morning, we met them at the church. We had a 6 o'clock in the morning departure from the town hall where they had left their vans, and we had Ben with us, and Jim and I and Ben got out in our driveway. A tree had fallen down, so Jim had to run and get the chainsaw before we could even get to the town hall on Monday morning because it was a big storm Sunday night. And they left Monday morning, and they had a 15-hour drive home, which they did in one day. And Ben's comments to me about that were that they were thrilled. They were very happy going back home. They had had a wonderful experience here. They loved this community. So there's transformation. And hopefully they'll carry that to other East Coast liberal elites. who they will stop hating also, or stop stereotyping. And, the hope in all this is that people will stand up. And the next time you hear something about a hillbilly, or they hear something about an East Coast liberal elite, they'll say, wait a minute, we had this experience, and these are people we met, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, I'm just wondering about the gender balance of the two groups.
Our group was fairly even. We had more women, but only by a few, and their group was mostly women. They had 3 or 4 guys who backed out at the last minute for health reasons and other things. So it was not as mixed. Yes, Stuart.
What were some of their biggest fears of us? Liberal elites. Sorry.
Yeah.
What were their stereotypes of our community, our Northeast?
Anybody in our group want to answer that? Anybody got any idea from our group?
I mean, aside from closing down coal.
Well, the reason, go on, Stacy.
Stand up. Oh, sorry. It's not so much a stereotype, and maybe someone else that will come to their mind, but what comes to my mind is how they were so surprised at how we left our homes and left our communities, and we send our kids off to that we go to college, that we send our, now I'm stereotyping a little too. So that we would send our kids off to college anywhere far away, and their connection to home was so strong and so deep, and it was perplexing to them how we just kind of move and go. That was one little tidbit. Yeah.
Well, I would just, 2 women stayed with me who were cousins. Both of them were educated, both college graduates. One was an artist. The other one had been a guidance counselor and is now working on developing the farmers markets. And in both of their cases, their children have gone. So I didn't ever feel conflict with them. I felt instead that I was with 2 very kindred spirits. And one of the women said that she had been a Bernie person. Bernie person. Now, I don't know if that's who she voted for in the final. I did not ask. I mean, I think one of the things that probably all of us did was we were careful. We were very polite and well behaved. They were well behaved and we were well behaved. Because you just didn't want to step on toes and offend people that you barely know. But I didn't have a sense of great distance. I didn't feel like I was with the other. I felt like I was with my sisters. And I don't have sisters. But these women were so comfortable, and they were wonderful. That's what they were.
There is a stereotype exercise that I sometimes do with groups when I'm doing training, where people go into their separate sides and they talk about the stereotypes they have about the other side, and then you bring them into the plenary and you talk about which are true and which are not true and what are they based on. I didn't do it with this group because this group got so intimate so quickly. I didn't want to break that. But so we didn't learn a lot about what stereotypes they have about us, but we will probably learn it when we get down there. One very funny comment was, one of the people here told someone in Kentucky, one of the Kentuckians who came here told someone that she was coming here, and he said, well, that's nice, have a good time, just don't bring any of them home with you. But we're going in April, so they're all going to bring us home with them. So we're going to stay in their homes. We're going to have the same intimacy experience staying with them. And we'll probably learn more about that because there'll be a public event, and we don't know how that will go. But we didn't ask that directly. I saw another hand. Yeah, Emma.
You mentioned there wasn't as much gender balance, but in our group we were talking about the teenagers who came, and it was mentioned that one of the teenagers from Kentucky is transgender.
Yeah.
And I was just interested to hear, more about, did you have a sense of how this young person found the climate of acceptance here versus there, or anything about that?
This young person didn't want to go home. This young person wanted to move into Amherst and stay forever.
Yes.
Pam, you talk about this, please. Pam worked with the teenagers.
You know, they did. He was very surprised at the amount of work that students in Amherst Regional High School do around equity in general, and specifically gender equity. And what he was most struck by was the universal unisex bathrooms, that you don't have to declare whether you are male or female to go into a bathroom. And we talked a lot about that at the brunch, and also the idea that even in the elementary schools in Amherst, the bathrooms that used to say boys and girls now are just bathrooms, and you turn a little card and you go in. You know, one person goes in at a time, you know. And so he was really struck that there was a whole group called the Sexuality and Gender Alliance, and that there were pride marches, and there was social action all around the school. Now, I have to say that the 4 people that came from the high school, Amherst Regional High School, tended to be very socially active. One of them says that she's the most socially active person in the school. I come to doubt it. When I wrote a letter of recommendation, I didn't doubt it one bit. But so there was a way in which the information that Nick Dom got was very, I say Nick because I have a transgender nephew. And when I saw it, and so it personally moved me to try and do something, to see if we could find an ally. And I have to shout out to Sarah Barber Just and Emily Pritchard. I don't know if any of you know either of those 2 wonderful teachers, but they helped pull together teams that were the most amazing representatives of our larger community that we could have asked for, that participated in everything, and that went off with the teens and went to Northampton and Amherst, as you said, Paul, and did all kinds of fun things, and that was the kind of bonding experience they had. So.
One of the 2 girls, and these 3 kids, one of the 2 girls said to me, I went to Northampton. Do you know what a falafel is? I had a falafel!
Go down to
no falafels in Kentucky. I can't hear you. Say it louder, please.
Are any of the teens going to be able to go down to Appalachia?
We're working on that. We don't know quite how it's going to happen.
Yeah.
We may do a separate teen weekend and have them go down separately and do something to focus on them. So it's all a work in progress with the kids.
They do want to.
Yes, Barbara.
Did any of the participants talk about any relatives in their family that may have left their immediate community and the experience? I mean, did anyone have that kind of experience?
Well, Gwen talked about her kids moving a couple of hours away, and she thought it was a major tragedy
to get a job.
To get a job, but that's but it wouldn't be for us a major tragedy, but for them because the mindset is so different. But your families, those kids went away, right?
Yeah.
Val, and did they talk about that at all, Pat?
A little, but I mean, they didn't do a lot of kvetching about it. They just said, the one woman travels every weekend 4 hours to see her grandchildren. Her kids have moved away to over by Lexington. The other woman's son gets up crack of dawn Monday morning, goes off to his job, comes back Friday night.
He's 6 hours away on the other side of the state, right?
Yeah.
It's a long schlep. So it's hard.
I thought that one of the most important things that was done in the Saturday morning, the Saturday program, was the sharing of the Leverett history. I think that to show our commonality in terms of the basis of the environment, I think he did a magnificent job of showing that a lot of this has to do with economics and the fact that the University of Massachusetts came here and profoundly affected Leverett. And that's where we really need to go, even those of us who didn't live here then, but there are people who did live here then and know when the economy on the mills and the forestry dropped out, that's something they could relate to.
We can thank Pam for the gorgeous slideshow that we showed with the presentation of Leverett. And Dave Palmer from Leverett said, the university rescued us. Leverett would have been a little town still making charcoal and box factory toys and things, because that's what Leverett did 100 years ago. And we've had the luxury of the universities coming and all the concomitant things that have happened since then, which has brought all of us here. We wouldn't be here either. Most of us don't come from here, and we probably wouldn't be here. But when you're in Kentucky, people who are there come from there. It's not a place with a lot of in or out migration. So our experience there will be very different because they will really be natives. Sandra.
I'm curious about the religion, what kind of religion they practice, and did you share about that, and what kind of religion people here practice?
Well, it was quite interesting because in the Friday when we started the immigration stories, we discovered in our group that 7 of the 18 of us were Jewish, and Ben was the first Jew these people had ever met. Ben is the guy who was the coordinator. He's from Hartford. He's got a PhD in cultural studies from the University of Minnesota, and then he found this job at Apple Shop in Whitesburg, Kentucky, and moved there. So he's a real outsider. He's been there 2 years, and
he's an immigrant to them.
He's an immigrant. He's their first Jew. There's no native Jews there. So fortunately, they were already learning about Jews from him. We weren't the first ones they met, but our stories were very big for them, and that was about identity. It wasn't so much about the religious aspect, but it was about the identity of being Jewish. They're all Christian. Their music is quite Christian. They're church-going. They do songs, as Christian songs, before meals, before groups, at the end of groups, at the end of meals. There's a lot of that. A couple of them went to the Congregational Church on Sunday morning. They don't have any Congregationalists in Kentucky either. They're Baptists. But they went to the Congregational Church on Sunday morning. Some of them wanted to do that here, Leverett Congregational Church, which has a big sign saying immigrants and refugees welcome on it. You couldn't get away from it, no matter where they went. They were getting liberal propaganda everywhere. So some went to church. We didn't have any discussions. People might have in their host families. Did anybody have a conversation about religion? Any of you with your hosts, your guests?
Only a tiny little one with one person, and I said, if you'd like, you could go to the Congregational Church or the Baptist Church. And she said, We did not address the topic further.
Anybody else have any of you with your groups? Yes, please.
My husband and I are fascinated with this because I'm a native Kentuckian.
Are you?
I grew up in Lexington, the other part of Kentucky.
Not the coal country.
No, that's right. But we spent some time over there. We were married by a minister from there. We spent a year teaching there. And he's probably also an interesting anomaly because he's probably the only person here who was born and brought up in Amherst. But anyway.
Probably true.
I would suggest to you that there's another book you might like to read that has to do with another kind of migration that happened out of Kentucky, and that was during World War II, when a lot of people moved up to Detroit and places like that to work in the factories. Harriet Arnault is the writer, and it's called The Doll Maker.
Oh, sure.
Yeah. Oh, yes, I remember that book.
Don't see the movie. The movie doesn't do justice to the story. It's a wonderful book.
Okay, we'll write it down and circulate it. We also did a lot of reading, by the way. We had a whole list of books, and all of us in the committee read all kinds of things about Appalachia and coal country and so forth. And we had a film night in the library, and we showed a whole bunch of films on Appalachia. So we were trying to do our homework, and I'm sure we'll do more as it gets closer to April, and we're actually getting ready to go, and it's going to hit us on the head. We better learn a little more. So we will do that. I hope we didn't say any negative stereotypes about Kentucky.
I just wanted to add one small thing that, when I think about it, was kind of important about mindset. Gwen, who was, for folks who went on Saturday, you won't forget her. She was the woman who got up and talked about voting for Trump. She had brought a big satchel full of hymnals to the contra dance when we did the shape singing. And afterwards I thanked her for bringing them. And she looked really embarrassed and she said, well, they're kind of worn out. And I thought, oh boy. You know, and I said, well, they still work. But you know, that revealed her mindset about what we would think it had to be new and shiny and no dog-eared pages, as opposed to the wonderful gift that she brought, bringing this satchel full of hymnals so we could sing together. So it was, I mean, that probably revealed as much about attitudes, I think, to me as anything.
There are two more things I want to do before people feel that it's time to start sliding out of here. I want to talk about what you might do in your own towns, and I want to find out if there's interest in some dialogue training. There are people inside the bridging committee who would like some dialogue training, and I've thought about offering 3 sessions in January, either Saturday morning or Sunday morning, someplace in Leverett, if there's interest. So I want to find out, just with shows of hands, if there's interest. How many of you will be? Okay. Now the hard part, the Saturday or Sunday part.
Saturday.
How many prefer Saturday morning to prefer Saturday morning?
Either. I don't mind. Would you have to do 3 in a row?
Leave your hands up, please.
Is it a 3-part series or a
3-part series? 3 Saturdays or 3 Sundays in a row. How many prefer Sunday mornings? I bet it's going to be even.
Can you do it either?
Either's okay.
How many people did you vote?
Maybe you could do one Saturday and one Sunday.
Well, I don't know about venues, and it's harder for
I'm very
people to do
interested. I
that.
don't have a big
Anyway,
preference on Saturday.
we have your email addresses. If you did not leave your email address, please do, because we now have to figure out if it's going to be Saturday or Sunday, because you're all divided and you didn't solve our problem for us. And
see, we can't agree on anything. We liberals.
What?
We liberals can't agree on anything.
Liberals can't agree on anything.
Given that it's intercession, you might also ask how many people are going to be around the first couple of weeks in January, and how many people would prefer to start later.
No, I'm not going to do that. You will get a notice sometime in the next week. There'll be a sign up. And it will be 3 sessions. There'll be 4 hours each. I'm not doing a weekday evening because we want a chunk of time to be able to go deep and make this worthwhile. And a Saturday or Sunday morning allows us the space. A 2 hours, 7 to 9 o'clock in the evening doesn't work. It's the middle of the winter. It's harder. So it'll happen very soon, and I'm glad there's so much interest. And the other thing we want to talk about is you're doing things in your community. Does anyone have any inkling about doing, it doesn't have to be what we did, but doing any sort of dialogue in your community? Okay, would you say something, where you're from and what you're thinking about? Stand up so people can hear you.
I live in Coleraine and I'm working on the energy committee there, and there's a lot of disparity between whether we should adopt the stretch code because of the poor people in Coleraine versus the newcomers who think we should do the stretch code. So we have a dialogue we're trying to figure out how to.
Okay, and that's the same group you're working with, Randy?
I'm working, hi Elizabeth, I'm working with a minister friend of mine who's thinking of teaming up with a very, very conservative minister church right in the same community, assuming that there are people of very different political persuasions and these very different religious persuasions.
Yeah.
But we haven't tested that, and it's just at the very, very beginning.
Good. Before we found Kentucky, we tried to find something local. We tried Athol, we tried Orange, we tried Turner's. These are little towns right around Leverett that all voted for Trump. We couldn't find the right partner. My biggest takeaway from this whole experience is you need the right partner who has credibility in the other community and believes in what you're doing to help you make entree.
they need a leader too on the other side too.
Yeah.
Like we had Ben.
We had Ben. We need somebody like that who's a credible person who can help you build something on the other side. We've tried the ministers in town. We tried many things. And we're going to try again starting in January. Part of what the Leverett Bridging Committee wants to do is to keep working on this idea of building something locally. And Linda and I have been trying in Amherst also to do it. It's hard to find the partners. It's hard to find folks who want to talk to us. We tried in Athol with people that Mark knows. Yeah, Mark and I just talked. Yeah. Okay, so anybody else besides Coleraine planning on doing something? Yes.
Well, I, about a year ago, for a project, designed a peace circle and brainstorming process for, actually it was in Holyoke, and I'm from Wendell. But I had been doing design thinking workshops there for a couple of years, and then we began to hear that there was starting to be hard feeling from the people who had been there for a long time, trying to solve problems in the community, and all these artists were showing up and getting the spotlight when they'd been trying to solve it for years. So what I began to realize is we needed to create a container where difficult feelings could be shared without people getting hurt.
Right.
So we did a Native American talking stick circle for the first half.
Good.
We had somebody on a whiteboard, and so they were making a checkbox when more than one person said the same thing, and then we brought that into a brainstormer, and we let them turn those into how might we questions, and we let them answer them with post-its, and we let them sort them into topics. So I'm seeing now a need to do that on a regional basis, and I emailed you about that.
Good.
So
Yeah, Paul, I just want to mention, we have, in the Athol and Orange area for the last 30 years, we've been doing exactly what you're talking about, and I'm very encouraged. I found it in Directed Hands Across North Quabbin, which I found helped inspire this group, so I was very happy when I saw the announcement, but I can say it's transformed our community. We've had a systematic, focused, again, nonstop effort by many groups, building trust through dialogue, also through direct action, build a park, help a kid in need. Again, we've gone from infamously polarized to being considered a social capital rich, highly collaborative place. And the really encouraging thing I have found is people realize they need resilient, that the hurricane of change is upon us. We need resilient communities, and when offered a systematic, open-minded, thoughtful approach to connection in all the different ways to do that, I have practically not found one single person from all walks of life who has not used words like fresh, common sense, and hopeful. And like you said, the way people are feeling these days is they're waiting for someone to come and present them with a good idea or plan and the right leadership. So you're at the right time, and it should be encouraged.
Well, that's why you're all here and why you all came to the community events, because we need hope in this very difficult time. And this is a little sign of doing something active to make a difference in our communities. So we really want to encourage you. Part of our role now in Hands Across the Hills is dissemination. Is to be able to say to people, try something in your community, try in one afternoon, try a little gathering. See if you can find some folks from across the divide, whenever the divides are in your town, to talk about some of the issues. Because we need to do this. We can't let our politicians and our media keep us as divided as we have become in our society. So that's our hope. Yes, John?
There are two ingredients in this event that worked. One is you up here, and the other is Ben, who Jay discovered down there, and Apple Shop, which has been around since the 80s. I used to visit it.
That's right.
Down. How to find the equivalents in one of our towns and another town.
That's right.
It's a big challenge.
It's a big challenge, but that's what we have to work on. Yes.
Yeah, I'm just wondering, I think one of the interesting things that, the big takeaways that you talked about was this idea of people didn't know, the North. They didn't know what Northeasterners were. We didn't really understand what Kentuckians are about. What gives me some concern is if you, say, have a dialogue with people who are from your town, they kind of know you, the cultures are similar, so I guess on one level it's, you've got a more common ground there. But on another level, you don't have that sense of takeaway or listening or what's different or how do you find that common ground. So I just wondered if you could comment on that. That, I mean, if I think about my town where there were certainly people of various political persuasions, you would still have, you'd already have that commonality. They already have their biases. And it's not about, oh, you're just another Northeast liberal. I mean, it's more just...
Yeah, but you're a liberal. If you're from the Northeast, but you're a liberal and you're different. And I think there are ways in our towns that we can talk about these things. In Leverett and any other town, there are people with different political persuasions. They may be a minority, and they must feel beleaguered as a minority. I think it's tough in Leverett to be a Trump voter. They exist, but I think it's tough, and they don't generally come to our events, and we're trying to reach out and find ways to do music together or talking about doing other kinds of potluck things, etc. together to bring more community, to bring people into the fold so there's less separation. And then when critical social issues happen, you can talk to each other. Because critical social issues are going to continue to happen. We're in crisis mode in the whole country, so we need to be able to talk to each other. Guillermo?
Well, we're making the assumption that there is no Trump voters in this meeting today.
There may be. It's fine. Hopefully there are some, because we're all learning from each other. Yes, Rob.
Thank you. I just want to say before I make my little pitch, was anybody else here having a little problem keeping dry-eyed during this tonight? I was, trying to be discreet. This is amazing work. Amazing work. So thank you for this. I wish I'd been around. So I owe somebody over here $20 for asking, is there something we can do in our communities? And I've been trained by a group called Better Angels, which some of you may have heard of. And Better Angels runs Red Blue workshops, a 7-hour, one-day workshop to bring 7 people on one side together with 7 people on the other side. And together we listen and learn from each other. I came back at the end of November with grand expectations at having a workshop in every community. And so far, it's not working out quite like that. So, if you have a conservative friend who might be interested in co-organizing a workshop, I'd love a referral to that person. And if you have any interest in getting together with people from the other side, whichever side that is, to listen and learn from each other, I'd really like to hear about it. I have some flyers. And I'm one of the people wearing a red garment, so look for me after. Thank you.
Rob, what's your last name?
Robertson.
Better Angels has a good website.
Has a great website.
Oh, speaking of websites, Stacy, tell us about the website.
Well, handsacrossthehills.org. It's new.
There it is. We've got a website.
It's written down up there, if you'll remember, I'm sure. There is a way.
Stand up, Stacy. They can't hear you.
Okay. Well, the website is sort of a clearinghouse. It has a gallery of images from the weekend that we'll keep adding to. It has a blog with ongoing discussion. There's all the media that we've gotten, which has been plentiful. We keep posting up there. Anytime we have events, it'll be up there. There's a place where you can sign up to join our mailing list so that you can get this information into your inbox. And if you signed our email list tonight, I don't know if we had the list that said I want to be on the email list. Please put me on the email list. But is it safe to assume if you gave us your email that you'd like to be on the mailing list? Okay, I figured that usually works. And then there's also a comment page where we're just encouraging people to share your thoughts and ideas and hopefully spark conversation that can, lead to new ideas and be a springboard for anything else that can come from here.
It also has Sarah's song on it. So for those of you who didn't cheer up tonight, turn that on.
Great.
And the original article that you read that prompted this whole,
Oh, cool.
Oh, and also we're trying to populate an area called resources, and we're kind of hoping in the works to make a handbook of sorts about this process that we've gone through in the effort to replicate it.
That's our long-range plan, is to have some sort of little toolkit. We're starting out with these dialogue workshops, and then we'll see where it goes. Are there any other unfinished questions, burning questions that people want to ask, or comments that people want to make before we close?
Can you say how we would know about the trainings that you're...
I'm going to send everybody an email list as soon as we figure out the place and the time, and the day.
Paula, can
Yes.
you clarify, do you have to be here for all three?
No, but it's better. You don't have to be, but it's better.
No, I mean, I'd like to be there.
It'd be for at least two. If you just come to one, it's a little choppy, but at least two. Yeah, and 3 is better. Yeah, Sarah.
I wanted to repeat something I said in the small group, and just sort of invite us all to think about what is this chemistry that happens for us, where there's this euphoria when we've been told something about another group, and then we get to know each other, and there's this kind of radiant explosion. So I think that would be really exciting for us to all keep pondering and sharing our insights about that.
When I teach dialogue, which I do a lot in SIT, I've been teaching dialogue for graduate students there for 20 years and around the world, and I say to people, it's about 95% theory and structure and planning, and about 5% little pixie dust that just comes into the room and creates a kind of a transformative magic. And in a good dialogue, that really does happen, and that happened for us on the weekends. And it has this feeling of its magic, and I know it's not mostly magic, it's mostly very careful structure, but there is with that a little bit of magic. I learned when I started to work overseas in Bosnia 20 or 30 years ago that if you don't structure it, in that case, the first conversation people wanted to have was, "You started the war. It's your fault. You started the war. It's your fault. You started the war." It's the same as Trump, or immigration or abortion. It's just banging heads immediately. And in anything you do, you want to get completely away from that, because that doesn't create transformation. Right. It creates alienation and anger and discomfort. So in the structures that we're using for dialogue, the magic happens because the container is held, and the most important role that you will have if you facilitate is to hold the container. And it's kind of like this. It's like that's what you have to do. You have to hold all those 10 or 20 or 30 people who are in your circle in that container, so that they're safe, they're all respected, they're all recognized, and when they have that, they can do their work. They can say what they need to say, they can hold their feelings, they can relate to the other because they're safe. And our Kentucky people have spent a lifetime not being very well respected. And it was so important to keep pouring out respect and honoring them, not criticizing them, not beating them up, but really holding them and honoring them. And if you're working with people with different voting backgrounds and different class backgrounds, those issues are there. And respect is a kind of core human need that we have to give to people. So that's what I want to say in closing. And I want to thank all of you so much for being here. It was wonderful to have so much community support. It means a great deal to us. So thank you for this.